Okay, thank you, thank you. I know everyone's really excited to be here. We are so excited to welcome you. My name's Emily Leib, and I direct the Food Law and Policy Clinic here at Harvard Law School. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we're hosting this conference, why we're excited to have you here, and some highlights of what's happened the past few years since we had many of you here a couple years ago. But I first want to turn it over to the Dean of Harvard Law School, John Manning, who's here to welcome you on behalf of the school. Dean Manning is I just learned, actually, has been teaching now for 25 years and has been on the faculty here for 14 of those, and is a really well-known scholar on issues of constitutional law, separation of powers, statutory interpretation. Besides being a brilliant scholar and editor of 2 case books on the topic, he's also just a fantastic colleague and now has been a really supportive dean of our program. So I'm really personally grateful to him for the support he's provided us to make our program run and have staff and have a building and all those things, but also on behalf of the school for putting in all of the time and resources, our restaurant associates, our facilities, the IT program. This is a real effort on behalf of the school to bring everyone here and make it so comfortable and professional and nice. So thank you so much, and I want to have the dean come up and give you a real welcome. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for your superb work directing the Food Law and Policy Clinic and the work you do on the Mississippi Delta Project. It's really, you're a phenomenal member of this community, and you do so much for our students, and while doing that, you also do great things for the world. So very, very grateful for the work you do. So welcome to Harvard Law School, and thank you for being here to contribute to the growing conversation about food recovery and food waste. Our clinic, our Food Law and Policy Clinic, has been engaged in these issues in impacting the law and policies that lead to unnecessary waste, and it's done this for over 5 years, and it's recognized nationally as the leader in this important work. This is our second conference on this. In 2016, we had, of course, Reduce and Recover, Save Food for People, and we're here today, 350 people, and I won't say how many were on the wait list to be here, 350 people from across many, many sectors here to discuss the issues, to learn, and to work on solutions here at the U.S. Food Waste Summit. So I just want to say a quick word about our Food Law and Policy Clinic. It's the first clinical program of its kind in the nation, and one of the things I love about it is that it brings together students, government actors, nonprofits, business, community organizers to work toward building a healthier and, frankly, a more just food system. It's worked very hard on reducing food waste through research and advocacy on misleading labels. It's worked on how to create incentives to donate healthy, fresh foods, and its analysis has tried to figure ways to combat policies that, frankly, limit innovation in the reduction of food waste. Our students have been involved in this at every step of the way. It's important. It's wonderful for them. I will say that our Food Law and Policy Clinic works alongside our Food Law Lab, which does also research on topics of food law across the board. And there is a student-run Food Law Society, which also participates in the dialogue at this school and beyond. So it's a big topic here. It's something we are proud of working on, and I'm glad that we're continuing that work today. I want to say one other thing. So I want to take a moment, and I want to thank the people from Restaurant Associates, RA, who will help us today by providing us with food for this conference. So I think that's a wonderful thing in general. I also want to say that for today's conference, nearly 100% of the food that you will eat over the course of the conference is food that has been recovered and repurposed that would otherwise have gone to waste. I think that's a terrific thing. Yeah. And it's part of broader work that RA has done. So it's implemented a waste reduction program that was originally developed by the Compass Group called Waste Not. And under this program, what RA does is it tracks its food waste with a focus on production waste, overproduction, unused and out-of-date inventory, and works on promoting local innovation. And it's terrific. I think RA is wonderful, and I'm glad that you're going to have some delicious food that is recovered and repurposed rather than wasted today. So one little final note here. It's not a little final note. It's a big final note. So I have some statistics that I have learned for this conference that I didn't know before, and that I frankly find quite arresting, right? So 1/3 of the US food supply is wasted. That means tens of millions of acres of cropland. That means 300 million barrels of oil. That means 20% of our nation's fresh water usage goes to producing food that is never consumed. And on top of that, of course, the food that is not eaten sits in landfills and produces greenhouse gases. And Project Drawdown, and the research director will of course be speaking to you later this morning. Project Drawdown has estimated that combating food waste is the third most impactful solution to climate change. And so that's on the supply side. And then on the demand side, 42 million Americans are food insecure. That includes 13 million children. So if you think about what this wasted food can do, who it can feed, who it can help, the people for whom there can be food on the table because of the work that you will be doing, this is a very important and very consequential conference, and it's a very important and very consequential body of work. So I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being here. I want to say thank you for thinking as hard about the issues that you're thinking about. I want to thank you for the work that you do beyond today on the questions of food waste. I want to thank Emily and the Food Law and Policy Clinic, and I want to thank ReFed for co-hosting this summit. I look forward to hearing about the ideas and the collaboration and the solution that come out of today, and I look forward over time to the significant impact that these collaborations will have on addressing the problem of food waste and providing solutions to that problem. Thank you very much for being here.
All right, good. I got you. Thank you, Dean Manning, again, for being here. Hopefully you'll come back for some recovered food later throughout the few days. All right, I'm going to try to climb up on my chair. Okay. Okay, welcome again. I just want to kind of share a little bit, and then Chris will also talk a little bit about why we're really excited to have you all here and some updates. And I think most of you know that this is obviously a really exciting space to be in. As the dean mentioned, we have just been overwhelmed with how many people are here, how many people are interested in this topic and want to be here. So luckily, we're going to be able to tape record sessions and live stream some of them for the many people who couldn't be here today, which is great. So you heard a little bit about what we do at the Food Law and Policy Clinic, but I want to also echo, again, what the dean said, which is many of these projects that we've worked on in this space are projects that our students and our interns are working on, and many of them are here today or will be here the next few days. So it's been a great opportunity for them to learn, and then a lot of them are going out and working in this space going forward. So it's a way that we're kind of having impact. And because of the work that we're doing in this space and because of the great space that we have to convene people, we've decided 2 years ago to hold a first conference. And I want to give a shout out to the EPA and Mass Department of Environmental Protection and Recycling Works for co-hosting that conference with us. Many of those folks are here and really, helped us with that initial conference. And there were some great things that came out of that. I think for us, it was a chance to meet many of you in person that we hadn't met. Some of us, we have had phone relationships. And I heard from many people already this morning and over the past few weeks that that was the same for you, that there's all these people you talk to, you email with, you never got to really see them in person. So there were relationships built that people have maintained in those few years. And then we also got to learn, and I'll say the last 2 years, a lot of the work we've done here at the clinic came from conversations and panels and working groups that took place at the last conference. So I'm actually just back from maternity leave and ready again in listening mode to hear what are the things we should be prioritizing the next 2 years from all of you. So it's a great way for us to crowdsource ideas for how we should spend our time, and I know the same is true for ReFed. And then we also built new structures for working together. So at the last conference, and something we're repeating this time around, we held some working groups where rather than us just sort of reporting to you, we really put people in a room to discuss a topic and come up with ideas for how to solve it. And I'll just give one highlight of that as inspiration for what I'm hoping will happen again. So one of the groups was the Food Safety for Donations working group. And we kind of got in a room and said, everyone's been talking about this challenge that health inspectors often give very different guidance as to when you can donate food or how or what things you need to do with that. So we, as a group, decided that we wanted to study this issue. The working group members formed a steering committee, many of whom will be presenting actually tomorrow on this topic. And then we, with the working group, conducted a survey of food safety officials in every state in the country to find out about what their practices were, what guidance they had. And we learned that most of them didn't have any regulations on food safety for donated food, but all but 2 of them said that they would really like if someone would give them some guidance to use. So the group then helped us form a recommendation to the Conference for Food Protection to add this to the FDA food code. So that, you'll hear more about it, but just to give you a sense of the power that came out of being together and coming up with an idea and everyone pitching in to work on it together, I found it incredibly rewarding and valuable, and it's now, really taken hold. So this time around, we're really, really delighted to partner with ReFed. It's been, we've been partners on a lot of other projects. We've worked together on the policy tool and the ReFed website, on publishing reports together, on sharing ideas and collaborating, and it's been so valuable for us to bring in their deep network and expertise in the innovation sector, the business sector, the capital sector, and adding that to our expertise in policy and law and government. So it's been amazing. We've gotten so many new ideas, so many new connections. So I want to just say how grateful we are to ReFed for partnering. So I want to say a few things about just on the policy side, the kind of state of the state, and then I'll let Chris speak for himself about welcoming you and then what they've seen from their sector. But I wanted to give a roundup just to express just how much is going on in this space from my vantage point looking at policy. So first thing, just at the federal level, there's been a lot of activity within the agencies. There'll be a session later today with just hearing from USDA and EPA in particular, who have spent tons of time really thinking through and providing programming and outreach and technical assistance on these topics. The U.S. Farm Bill is being considered right now, and for the first time ever, both the House and Senate drafts of the Farm Bill include programming to address food waste. So this is huge. I mean, we spend a huge amount of money on getting food planted and grown on farms, but none of those dollars before ever went to making sure that food actually made it to someone's table. And I think that's because of the work and the awareness raising and the education and the speaking out that so many people in this room have done. At the state level, according to our tally, which our wonderful interns were putting together last week, In the most recent legislative sessions in all the states around the country, there were 91 unique pieces of legislation introduced in 30 states. So more than half of the states right now are either considering or have passed this year legislation that would seek to alleviate the problem of food going to waste. Some of the top most common bills, there's a lot on school donation, which has been really interesting to see. As one example of that, both Texas and Oklahoma passed really interesting legislation to make it easier to have liability protection for food being donated directly to family members and communities where those schools reside, rather than having to go to a nonprofit first. A lot of also guidance on share tables. California and other states require now guidance to create share tables in schools where food can be put, to make it really clear we don't want this food to get thrown away. There's been a lot of activity on state level tax incentives for food donation. So since we launched the policy tool, I guess last spring, there's been 3 more states that have passed state level tax incentives to encourage food being donated, and about 3 other states are considering those right now. There's a lot of state law on wild game donation. I don't know where this is all coming from, but we don't want wild game to be wasted either. So it's great, but it's been interesting because that's one of the most common ones we've seen. And then also a lot of states are considering standardized date labels, which is something that California also passed, encouraging use of the voluntary standard that Grocery Manufacturers Association and Food Marketing Institute recommend. Just a few others. There's also a lot of awareness. California passed a Compost Awareness Week. Tennessee has a Food Waste Awareness Month, and Pennsylvania a Food Pantry Donation Month. Again, all of this within the last year. And I could go on and on. 22 of these bills, of the 91, have already passed into law, and a lot more are pending. At the local level, there's been a lot more work in expanding curbside composting here in Cambridge, in New York City, Minneapolis. There's a lot of work on zero waste. Boston is launching a zero waste plan. Philadelphia launched a zero waste and litter cabinet. So there's a lot of action there, and then also local level grants and funding to support food waste efforts and food recovery efforts. So, so many people have contributed to these. We can't take credit for anything I mentioned, really. There's a lot of local level energy and efforts going into this and thoughtfulness about this. But obviously there's still so much more to be done. So I'm excited over the next few days to share more of the information we've been finding, to learn from you about what we should be doing next, and which of these best practices to be sharing with more states, and which are ones that might not be successful because they're really not going to help with the day-to-day work of what you do. So that's just a snapshot. I know, just to show how much is going on. So I'm going to let Chris do that too, and then I'll come back to thank a couple of the people who helped make this possible.
That's great. Well, Chris Cochran at ReFed, we're delighted to be joining this group. I wasn't able to attend the conference 2 years ago, but in talking with many of you leading up to this, anticipating the second, it's been one of your favorite events, and I think it's because of the connections that you're able to make here. Just yesterday, we had a group of 50 innovators across the space meeting with food businesses and funders, and it was amazing to see the energy in the room of these connections being made, and just exciting to think about what's going to come from that. And I couldn't be happier to be here. And when I look out at the room, this is the group of leaders, the decision makers who are taking action in this space. One of the things I love about working on this topic is that it is a classic systems change problem that is solvable, but takes this diverse group of stakeholders we have taking coordinated and collective action to solve. So when we think about this system, I think starting with policy that sets the rules of the game, and John was speaking my language around supply and demand, policy is setting some demand in place for changing. But not only that, this is an area for economic return for businesses and for investors. So I think we have incredible tailwind in this issue, unlike any other issue profile that we work on in our work. When I think about the complement, so not only is there momentum in policy, as you mentioned, 91 bills in 30 states, but there's also momentum in food business and in innovation and in capital. And I think of those actually sequentially, because you set the rules of the game and then food businesses are responding to those. I know Kyle Pogue from Cal Recycle is thinking about how do we partner with food businesses in California to send less food waste to landfill, just like John Fisher has from Mass DEP here in Massachusetts. I was talking with Elise Golan right before this speech, and she was reminding me that about half of all retailers since our last conference have now committed to Champions 2030, which is pretty amazing thinking about this collective goal we have to cut food waste in half as a nation. We have seen, I think, ambition from companies like IKEA that have said, we're going to actually try to do that much more quickly. We're going to do that by 2020. And then I think we've also seen ambition and aspiration by Kroger, who's in the room, and saying we're actually going to try to achieve zero food waste by 2025. And I think those can be really true north points for us as we think about how we're approaching this space and how businesses are approaching this space. And I also think this takes us all, and I think I really love looking at the work that World Wildlife Fund has done with a number of food businesses, including the hospitality sector this past year, launching hotelkitchens.org. Because food businesses are paying attention to this space and because there's an enabling policy environment, food waste is a burgeoning innovation sector. Last year, we released the Innovator Database, tracking over 400 innovators, 50 of whom were in the room yesterday and are in the room today, who are leading the charge on providing goods and services to meet this challenge. I love seeing the maturity that's happening in the space, but also how relatable it is. When you think about creating marketplaces like Amazon for surplus food, or you think about using an Uber model for next generation food donations, or if you think about just the basic data and measurement systems that are becoming commonplace, it's incredibly exciting to see this innovation sector. And I think because of that, you're seeing investors take notice. I was at a conference just last week around the future of food technology. And this is a macro theme even outside of this room that investors are taking notice of, both from the philanthropic and from the private side. And so you've seen philanthropic investment increase from, dedicated philanthropic investment increase from about $5 million when we were first starting this conversation back with Wasted in 2012. And then you've seen that increase to $20 million annually that really is catalytic funding for this space. And you see that translate to then venture capital and private equity becoming engaged. So since we last met, there's been over $100 million invested in startups in this space. And I think that's the type of exciting scale that we're starting to see go across the country. Not only that, something that was unexpected to me coming to this space was that states are investing. And so when I think about the great grant programs like Mass DEP, New York, the state of Tennessee, and also Cal Recycle, who's given over $90 million out over the past 5 years to enable services in this space. So I think when we have this opportunity we have is incredible, thinking about the systems problem we have, but one that's solvable, but one that takes each of those components of the people who are represented in this room today to achieve. So I hope as you approach this conference, you'll think about why you're here, you'll think about the opportunities you have to connect with others in the space, some of which may be unlikely partners, some of which you've been wanting to meet for weeks and months. And then you'll also view this as an action-oriented conference. And that's one of the things I think is quite distinctive, particularly our working groups. And just thinking back to not only the donations food safety group that got together, but also the date labeling group that really has emerged to align on this two-date system. Industry is committed, making progress, and I can't wait to see what comes out of this conference and what comes next. So delighted to have you all joining us. I really view this group as the leaders, and anything we can do to support you from the REPED point of view, we are so happy to do that. I can't wait to hear what ideas emerge from this conference.
Hear, hear. All right, so we would be remiss without thanking a lot of people. So to make this integrated, we're going to take turns doing some of the thanks, but both of these really come from both of us. So as you can probably tell, there are a lot of people here helping out. So I want to just first start by thanking the REFED team, which have been amazing to work with. Not only Chris Cochran, also Chris Hunt in particular has been incredible, but also Alex, Jackie, Angel. Who else did I miss from the REFED team? Everyone else from the REFED, but those in particular have been really put in a lot of time. And then Heidi Hart, who's our event director and has been great with getting a lot of setup. You'll see her probably out at registration a lot of the time. Katrina Kazda, who helped with recovered food and worked with our restaurant associates. I'll say also I mentioned before, restaurant associates, facilities, IT here at the law school. I just want to remind everyone too, we're guests at the law school, so it is my place of work, but also they're letting us take over the whole building. There's a mob of us running around. Take a moment, if people are walking through, be kind to them, explain why we're here. If we're nice, we'll be able to come back, and if we're naughty, we won't be able to. So for my part, please be nice to the other programs and staff and people, and use it as a moment to educate them too. We're constantly trying to bend their ears about why this topic's important, but hearing from all of you will be helpful. And then our volunteers, Tessa, Caroline, and Christina, as well as our interns, Kyla, Tess, and Amy. And then just a big, most important thank you to the FLPC staff. So Laura, Najima, Kat, Nicole, Lee, but especially Katie Sanson and Annika Nielsen, who really without them, this conference wouldn't have happened because I was home taking care of a baby for the past 3 months. So, I've heard from a lot of you individually what a great job they did, but I think everyone I just mentioned, if you see them, be kind to them, thank them. Everyone's put in a lot of time to make this come together. So thank you to all of them.
Yeah, Emily, just would echo that. Thanks. I've been incredibly impressed with our teams and all the people who've come together to make this possible. Would also like to thank our sponsors. I'm new to the nonprofit space, so working with funders in this area has been a new area of relationship for me. One of the things I've been so impressed by is just the thoughtfulness that we have in our funding partners, and that's no exception for the group that came together to make this event possible. So I wanted to recognize the Fink Family Foundation, General Mills, Kroger, Walmart Foundation, but also Clenil, Wells Fargo Innovation Incubator, Pisces, and Atticus. And I think one of the things I also love is just the diversity of interests and impact areas that those funders represent. And I think it really, I often say actually, we shouldn't care about food waste. We care about the outcomes that food waste produces, whether that's related to hunger, as Karen will talk about in a few moments, or related to climate, as Chad will talk about in a few moments, related to a number of other issues that we care about. And I just really love that our supporters are able to make this possible and represent the best of us in the diversity of interests, but this common vision and strategy that we have for achieving that impact. So thank you to our sponsors and again to the staff who's made this possible.
Hear, hear. All right. We're going to move on. Well, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move on. We're going to be in this room for the next few discussions, and then we'll kind of come up at the end of that and give you a little bit more logistics. So don't worry. We'll make sure you know where you're going before you have to go anywhere. But stick around for the next bit. Thank you and welcome again.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. Good morning. Very good. I'm Karen Hanner. I'm Vice President of Manufacturing Partnerships and Sustainability, and a longer title, but that's the focus of my work at Feeding America, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here today to help welcome you to this exciting session and to really continue in conversation with you throughout the next couple days. First, I want to thank Chris and Emily and the ReFed team and the Harvard team for convening this amazing group and really being able to host, and thank you for the weather, and to be able to really move this conversation forward. But I'm especially honored to be able to share the stage with Chad as we really bring together the really intertwined issues of domestic hunger, food waste, and environmental impact. As Chris just referenced, it's really the output, the outcomes of the work that we do together around environment and feeding people that is really the benefit of the work that we do. So as I share a perspective on hunger relief, first I want to start with a story. A story about someone who can tell you firsthand about hunger and what the food means that they are able to receive through the serving agencies to make a difference in their lives. Maybe that was wrong. I did it, it's good.
A little girl handed me her report card, and she told me my grades are now better because I get breakfast every morning from the food pantry. And it broke my heart. No kid should have to worry about what they're going to eat before they go to school. My mom had to work 2 and 3 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. And once I started having a family, I didn't want to live that way. I used to work for a cable company. I was out in the city doing a job, and I took a piece of coax through my eye. I lost a significant amount of eyesight, and I was left unemployed. Things took a turn for the worse for us. You have to decide whether you buy groceries or you put money on the light bill. Do you power your house? Do you heat your house? Or do you put food in your kid's stomach? Some days, me and my wife went without eating just to make sure the kids had enough. One thing you want to never do is be able to not provide for your family. And my wife was just insistent on, yes, you have provided for us for years, but we need help right now. So I used to receive assistance here at the food pantry, and I am now actually a director here. The best thing that happened for me was getting hurt on my job and getting me back to the things that I love to do, and that's helping families. Seeing that light come back on once a family has been broken down, it is an amazing feeling, and there's no paycheck that can compensate for that. Families do fall on hard times. We all could be one paycheck away from being in their situation as well.
What I love about that story is that it demonstrates the power that the food has in getting Lamont back on his feet and the power of hope that food brings to his family. That's the value of the work that we do together. Thank you. No? Okay. I feel like that was a success. For those of you that may not know us, Feeding America is a national organization that supports over 200 food banks that in turn work with their own networks of feeding partner agencies to actually distribute food to communities in need. Several of our members are here today, and I encourage you to have conversations with them as you go out the day because they'll be able to tell you more about the work being done in their communities. Nationally, thank you. Nationally, we support national partners. We advocate for federal legislation and nutrition education. We provide food safety training. We conduct research on hunger, and we support members with donor-directed funding. But the strength of our impact is really when our national work combines with the work being done locally by the food banks in their communities. Each food bank is dedicated to meeting the needs of the food insecure families that in their community by sourcing and distributing food, collaborating with partners across the industry, advocating with local government, which we've seen has been also having a huge impact locally in terms of food rescue as well as donation, and leveraging resources from the private sector and within their community, all to make a difference to help feed people. The core of our work is food bank and agency rescue across the supply chain, which requires creativity, ingenuity, and partnership with organizations, as all of you all know. As we source we really commit to increase the nutrition of the food that we're sourcing and being able to distribute to families to make a difference. Particularly now as we focus on rescuing food at the farm level, as well as additional smaller format consumer-facing businesses, which is where there's a huge volume of product to be rescued and the nutritional value is really high. Together, our network currently rescues over 3.5 billion pounds of food each year. This reflects the work of millions of volunteers, thousands of staff, hundreds and hundreds of local and national partners, and all doing what they do best in terms of identifying food to be rescued, sourcing, packing, distributing, repacking, and then finally sharing with men, women, and children that may or may not know where their next meal is coming from. Combined with the food rescued by others, this is an amazing accomplishment and we're making a significant impact. But it's not enough. We know, as the Dean referenced this morning and as was verified in the refed work, that there's billions and billions of more pounds of food to be able to rescue. And we know that there are millions of people that are still in need. Despite the work being done, the USDA continues to report that more than 41 million Americans may or may not know where their next meal is coming from and are classified as food insecure. They also don't qualify for federal food assistance programs and federal nutrition programs, so they turn to Feeding America and other charitable organizations to really be the primary source for them to help feed their families. In order to meet this need, the food banks and our partners continue to advance existing rescue projects like our retail rescue work at grocery stores and other consumer-facing businesses, and the more recent exciting produce rescue projects that I've shared in the past, the green beans, peachy salsa, tomato sauce, and others that I'm not going to repeat again today, don't worry. But today, I want to share some exciting new details about projects that we're creating in partnership or piloting with food banks and with industry partners across the country to help us really gain access to additional produce and particularly protein and dairy that are currently not being rescued and are going to landfill. For example, we have now 8 produce cooperatives that are in operation across the country, and this is where our members come together and work across boundaries to be able to source and access more fruits and vegetables and being able to share them to be able to split loads so that the product can then go to more of the smaller food banks that cannot take a full truckload of one particular commodity. It's really opened access to be able to rescue more food, and also empowered us to be able to get more nutritious, valuable produce into feeding clients in those communities. Our government relations team is working closely with Emily and your team, as well as many of the rest of you across the country, to work with members of Congress, USDA, FDA, EPA, and others to make sure that the legislation, policy, and regulation addresses food waste and strengthens food donation incentives, really to enable our work across the country, both nationally and locally. This year, the Farm Bill, which Emily referenced, is a huge opportunity to really make an additional change in this area. So we really applaud the efforts by this entire community to really push that through. There's hope, and we hope that we're going to make a difference this time. Our online donation platform, Meal Connect, is connecting more smaller offers of product, especially those from smaller consumer-facing businesses, directly to agencies. This is something that's important because it enables the food to move quicker. When it's got short shelf life, it's quickly distributed to clients and maintains the nutritious value of the food. We're able to connect directly to agencies in all communities, particularly focusing on food deserts, where there may not be a brick and mortar agency to be able to distribute. We're working on being able to work in mobile pantries and be able to move things really quickly into these areas of really high need. This month, we celebrated the 2 millionth transaction on Meal Connect, which is a huge accomplishment. And as we continue to build out the capabilities, we're focused on technology that will enable us to be able to connect with client, which has been done by some of the work with Feeding Florida, a consortium of food banks in the state of Florida, and lots of other opportunities to move forward. Another particular enhancement, which was just rolled out, was the ability to connect rejected loads directly to agencies so that truck drivers can continue on their way and drop off product and not worry about, dumping it. It's an efficient way to get the food that's rejected directly to clients, and that's with the help with funding from General Mills to really add that technology. Dairy is the #1 item that our clients request when we ask what is needed, particularly fluid milk. Through our partnership with Dairy Marketing Institute and the Center for Innovation, we've expanded our access to more fluid milk significantly this year through a program that provides cost recoupment for the processor and enables the processor to be able to use the milk that has no market currently to be able to feed their community and yet still create a revenue stream to compensate them for the incremental effort that goes into making that milk into a distributable, consumable form. We've also got exciting construction happening across the network with USDA-inspected meat packing facilities in a couple of food banks, particularly in Cincinnati with Freestore Food Bank, and then the Food Bank of Arkansas in Little Rock. We're working with the local health inspectors as well as national USDA. We're creating the ability to be able to safely pack both raw and cooked meat and be able to package it and label it to distribute it direct to clients. This product had been previously is currently going right to landfill, and we're discovering that millions of pounds of this really valuable commodity that has a high level of resource investment in it is currently not making it to feed people, and we're committed to changing that. Another promising pilot along these same lines is working with Phil Abundance, who's also here, to be able to access product at the ports. We know that working with USDA that there's product that comes in and gets rejected, and being able to direct that product to feed people instead of it being dumped or returned to point of origin is something that is really, really high importance to us as now. And what we learned in Philadelphia, we'll be able to replicate with other food banks as well. All these examples are of innovation out of necessity, right? To access food to feed more people. And it reflects engagement with the industry, with foundations, with government partners, all of the sectors represented here and probably more. But everyone has a passion to do the right thing environmentally as well as socially. But the best thing is that each of these programs is also structured in a way that it will be economically beneficial or at least cost neutral for all of the parties, so it therefore becomes sustainable. In looking forward, we see industry trends that continue to move toward more nutritious product at the consumer level, which is important because it not only benefits the consumers in general, but particularly our clients that are already potentially struggling with immune diseases and lack access to enough nutritious food. We also see an industry that's moving toward less waste across the system by focusing on source reduction, which Chad will reinforce in a moment, that has the largest impact on the environment as well as positive financial impact for companies. At the same time, we know that the industry is committed to waste reduction of the food excess that they see in their supply chains. And we're seeing a new willingness to help us to partner and other organizations to help partner in overcoming the challenges to get that product out of the food waste stream and help make sure that it feeds those that are in need. There's an escalated interest in caring for the planet and available resources, and a greater understanding of how food banks and rescue organizations are critical, sustainable partners. We're really seeing this commitment to ongoing partnership with this community. We also have a food bank network as well as a larger food rescue community that embrace the value of being a strong waste reduction partner across the industry. We have staff that thrives on a challenge and are really committed to their passion of ending hunger in their community. All of these together really bring together a community of action, and then fueled by the concern of the well-being of our neighbors is really helping sustain a trend to help feed our neighbors in need. Feeding America has committed to making meaningful progress toward ending hunger by 2025. It's a new stake in the ground for us because it moves beyond just feeding people to really addressing the economic needs, the root causes that put people in a food insecure position to start with. Being a sustainable partner across the industry is a key part of that because feeding is the core of what we do. While we invest in programmatic work to really increase the distribution of the product that's being rescued as well and getting it to more points across the country to more people, we're also looking to reduce to address the financial challenges of food insecure families and families in need, and to really help them particularly focused on working families to help them move out of food insecurity. We are thrilled to support creative solutions, innovative projects, new partnerships, and absolutely thinking out of the box types of opportunities. This is a place where these conversations are planted and really nourished or nurtured to grow, and we are thrilled to be a part of these next couple of days. It's a challenging yet very exciting time in food banking and in food rescue because of the convergence of all of these really important issues. Partnerships and a key understanding of the work is really what fuels us going forward. You know, to a food insecure single mom who's working 2 jobs, the food that we rescue isn't rescue food. What she gets at a church basement is dinner, it's breakfast, but it's knowing that her children don't have to go to school on an empty stomach. They won't go to bed hungry, and perhaps it puts a few extra dollars in her pocket to pay the bills at the end of the month. So it's working with this group and all of the teams that you all represent that give me confidence in knowing that we can look forward to a world where no food is wasted, and importantly, every family knows where their next meal is coming from. So thank you for that today. Enjoy the rest of your conference. And now I'd like to introduce to you Chad Frischmann, who's the Director of Research, Vice President and Research Director at Project Drawdown. I got it.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you all for being here today and giving me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about how the food system can be a solution to reversing global warming. But let's start with how we get there in the first place. Drawdown. Drawdown is that point in time when atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases begin to decline on an annual basis. It's that point when we take out more than we put into the atmosphere. And the proposition here is really rather simple. If we can reduce concentrations, we can affect global cooling, a reversal of anthropogenic global warming. But it may sound daunting, right? So Project Drawdown set out to map, measure, and model the most substantive solutions to reverse global warming. We identified 80 existing solutions that are currently scaling today, currently viable, and taken together as a system of solutions, adopted ambitiously, globally, but plausibly, can achieve drawdown. We've also mapped 20 coming attractions. These are solutions in the pipeline. When they get online, they're going to accelerate the process to achieving a reversal of global warming. These are technologies and practices that do one or more of 3 things. They replace existing fossil fuel-based energy generation with clean, renewable sources. They reduce consumption through more efficient technologies and behavior change, and biosequester carbon, basically absorb and store carbon in plants, biomass, and soils through a process we all know called photosynthesis. Through a combination of these 3 mechanisms, we can achieve drawdown. Humanity knows what to do. What we lack is the will to do it. And why is that the case? Well, we've done a really great job with the science and understanding around the problem, global warming, and the effect, the response to that problem, climate change. Climate change is the feedback of the system. But drawdown is the only solution to the problem that we know of. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has done a fantastic job. One of the greatest scientific endeavors in human history. Yes, it is consensus-based and conservative, but it is foundational. It is essential for us to understand what's going on in the world, and there are many other organizations that are working on this. It is essential, but the product is complicated, complex, and too distant for most people to act upon. This was bad. But this is for most people to act upon, right? And at the same time, we're constantly inundated in the media with stories of doom and gloom, horrifying headlines and terrifying images that are often crafted, photoshopped to elicit fear and panic and disempowerment. An overwhelming sense that there's nothing we can do about it. And all of this leads, distance with the science, fear, disempowerment, leads to apathy, an indifference to the status quo. And we know that these are the tools of oppression. Well, Project Drawdown was created to reframe the entire discourse to one of understanding, possibilities, and therefore opportunities. Because if global warming is happening to us, we're victims, mired in shame and blame. But if global warming is happening for us, it's a gift that enables and empowers us to recreate a future that we want, a future where reversing global warming is possible. But positive messaging and thinking alone aren't going to get us there, right? Just alone. And so Project Drawdown is not only a communications organization, but a living, ongoing research program that assembles the best available information, subjects this to data-driven, scientifically rigorous, vetted, reviewed modeling and analysis. It's the foundation from which we can communicate this to the world. We've built a global systems model from the ground up that evaluates solutions at global scale, looks at them as a system of solutions, not in isolation, but a system of systems, so that we can see stock and flow, system dynamics, avoid double counting, and produce results. But we have to communicate them in a different way. So we produced a book called Drawdown. Last year, in April 2017, it was produced. I'm just giving you a brief look at one of the spreads here. This is not the IPCC AR5 Working Group 3 2014 report. This is the kind of book you could take to the park on a Sunday and enjoy your day, right? I just want to do a quick look at this because we have to remember all of this rigorous science and analysis that we do have to be communicated in a way that's accessible to people. So what we've done with these models is produce results, right, that evaluates all these solutions in an integrated system at scale. It's a financial analysis as well as an emissions reduction and sequestration potential, right? So what we've done after this is we've added it all up over a 30-year period from the period of 2020 to 2050, assuming a vigorous, ambitious growth on all these different solutions, and ranked them. We've ranked them according to the total gigatons. That's 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So we're converting methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases into the equivalent value of carbon dioxide, so we can add it up. And that's how we've ranked them to see what are the most substantive solutions to reversing global warming. Because remember, that's how we actually draw down. And here's our top 20 of existing solutions. Now, what's surprised us through this analysis is that what we think of when we think of solutions to global warming, we think of coal-fired plants. We think of, natural gas and oil. We think of electricity generation, and it's true because it's the largest emitter as a sector. But in terms of solutions, in terms of potential impact, only 5 of the top 20 solutions have come to be electricity generation solutions. It's really surprising, challenges our way of thinking. The number 1 solution challenged our way of thinking, refrigeration management. Why is refrigeration a solution? Well, it's called hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. This is a refrigerant that we use in our appliances that keep the air conditioners going and keep our refrigerators and food cool and frozen. HFCs are hundreds to thousands of times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. We did a great job with the Montreal Protocol by limiting production of chlorofluorocarbons because of the ozone layer. But guess what? They replaced them with hydrofluorocarbons. A whole new problem. So what we've done here is modeled what happens if we were to manage leakage of refrigerants in appliances during their life, and then at the end of life, destroy hydrofluorocarbons. what we do right now is we throw these appliances into the landfill and they leak into the atmosphere. But if we were to just recover and destroy these refrigerants, about 90 gigatons could be avoided, the number one solution. And if we phased out hydrofluorocarbons in favor of natural refrigerants, which we have already, right? It already exists. Then we estimate up to 120 to 200 gigatons could be avoided from refrigerants. Amazing. 4 of the top 20 solutions relate to ecosystem management, how we deal with existing ecosystems like forests, wetlands, peatlands, and how we deal with currently degraded land, like tropical forests. This is tropical forest restoration on degraded lands, the number 5 solution. That's all sequestration. That's drawing down. But perhaps the most surprising sector was food. 8 of the top 20 solutions relate to reversing global warming, relate to how we produce, consume, and waste food. Perhaps it's not surprising if we think about the embodied emissions in every seed, every drop of oil, every breadcrumb. Across the supply chain, food is embodied with carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and hydrofluorocarbons to store our food. Just think about it. Every drop is embodied with everything, all these greenhouse gases. And so there are solutions that not only avoid some of these emissions, but also sequester carbon dioxide in the soil. And if we think about food and land use, 12 of the top 20 solutions relate to how humanity interacts with nature and land. Astounding. So let's just talk a little bit about production here, okay? How we produce our food. Annual cropping practices are a net emitter of carbon. We convert forest land or grassland into cropland, and over time through tillage release that carbon that's stored there. And it degrades the land. And every year we have to produce more and more synthetic fertilizers to produce the same amount of yield. But we don't have to. We can practice regenerative agriculture, or many different types of regenerative agriculture as well. This is about 11 in our book, right? Regenerative agriculture is nothing new. It's how we've been practicing agriculture for millennia. It is still being practiced by local indigenous peoples all over the world today. This is how we used to do it. This is a combination of reduced or no tillage, cover cropping, crop rotation, compost or manure application, organic practices. What this does is it turns cropland from a net emitter to a net sequesterer of carbon. It increases soil health and fertility, improves water retention, increases yield, improves livelihoods of smallholder farmers, and guess what? Also has financial return for large farming operations. It's a win, 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 win. There isn't really a disadvantage. And we already know how to do it. We've been doing it already. But it's not just how we produce food, it's how we consume. So a plant-rich diet, the number 4 solution, up to 66 gigatons, billion tons, can be avoided. This is not a vegan or a vegetarian diet, though I commend anybody who chooses that lifestyle. This is a healthy diet. And so what we've done is actually modeled a reduction in overall consumption, so overconsumption of food generally, and particularly overconsumption of animal-based proteins. And we're actually quite generous with this. We identify a healthy diet as 2,500 kilocalories per capita per day. That's pretty high. That's pretty high. And about 50 to 55 grams of animal-based proteins. And if we reduce this to this healthy levels, we can, not only do we have a healthy diet, but we avoid all of that extra production. But you have to think about it in terms of where we are in the world. Because in this room, in the high-income countries, we overconsume by a large measure. In low-income countries, it's the opposite. They're undernourished. So when we model this, we're balancing this. We're increasing the caloric intake in low-income countries and lowering the caloric intake in high-income countries over a 30-year period. And that process of creating a healthy diet can avoid 66 gigatons. Astounding. And of course, why we're here today is not only how we're consuming and producing, but how we're wasting food. Food waste accounts for roughly 8% of the world's greenhouse gases. That's an estimate, could be quite more. If you take it as someone came up recently, if you take it as a country, you add it up as if it was a country, and ranked the countries, it'd be the United States, China, and then the global food waste in terms of overall production of greenhouse gases. Across the world, we waste about 30 to 40% of food. Astounding. But it's not just food waste, it's also food loss. And so we have to think again where we are in the world. In low-income countries, this is early on the supply chain. It's about food loss, right? By and large. This is a technology problem, a storage problem, right? They don't really, in low-income countries, you don't get a lot of waste at the point of market or consumption. You get it more towards production, distribution, packaging, and so on. It's a refrigeration issue. And if we can provide technology in low-income countries that leapfrogs ahead of the hydrofluorocarbon mess that we're in now, and jump ahead to natural refrigerants, we've solved two problems. In high-income countries, again, like where we are here in the United States, it's the opposite problem. 20 to 30% of food is wasted at the point of market and consumption. It's a behavior choice. We make this choice every single day. How much food we purchase, what we consume, and what we waste. And we can make those choices and change our behavior and purchase what we consume what we purchase. And if we do that, we can avoid up to 70 gigatons of greenhouse gases across the supply chain. Now here's a real kicker. Now if you take all of those regenerative production practices I talked about, and you take our reduced food waste, and you take plant-rich diets and combine it as a system, because remember, it's a systems approach that we're looking at. If you combine these all together in parallel, we would be able to produce enough food today, on cropland today, without having to convert any new forest or grassland. We could feed the world's population a healthy, plant-rich diet, including population growth till 2050, without having cut down forests. That's what our research and models show us, if we address this as a system. Astounding. So is drawdown possible by 2050? The answer is yes. It is possible. But it's not one solution, or 5, or 10, or 20, or 40, or 60. It's 80 existing solutions. And there are actually many more solutions out there, but these are the ones we modeled. 80 solutions working together in parallel as a system. Together in parallel, we can achieve drawdown, the beginning of reversing global warming. The great thing about this is that we want these solutions, whether or not global warming was a problem. Many of them are being adopted for reasons that have nothing to do with global warming. When we think about renewable energy systems, we think about clean, abundant energy. We think about air pollution. We think about human health and well-being. When we think about family planning and educating girls, this is about human rights, gender parity, economic improvement. When we think about forest restoration, tropical forest restoration, when we think about forest protection, wetlands, peatlands, this is about the intrinsic value of our ecosystems, about biodiversity, the oxygen that we breathe, regenerative ag, multi-strata agroforestry, silvopasture, tropical tree staple crops. This is improved soil fertility, improved water retention, improved livelihoods of smallholder farmers around the world. If we look at this as a system of systems, what's happening here is a change, a shift. From a business as usual that is inherently exploitative and extractive to a new normal that is, by nature, restorative, and regenerative. This is the future that we want. Reversing global warming is just a very welcome co-benefit. Thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me? All right. I'm Allison Aubrey of NPR, and it's great to be here. We wouldn't all be in this room today if there were not pioneers in this space, right? So you're about to be looking at two of the pioneers, Dana Gunders, Jesse Fink. Thanks so much. So Jesse, through your philanthropy and through your impact investments, you have taken this space and forged us ahead a lot. Dana, through your work at the NRDC, through writing this waste-free handbook and all the education work you do, again, two pioneers in this space. We probably all have that moment where it dawned on us how big this issue is, right? For me, it was in the Salinas Valley in California. In 2015, I was there with Mary Beth Durkin, who's in the audience. We had a camera crew. We were shooting in a cauliflower field. And we walked over to the perimeter of the field. And the harvester said to us, you see this perimeter, this last row? No good. Nothing comes out of this field. And I said, why? It was this huge, massive field. It was a really, really windy day. And he walked me over to the field, and he picked up a cauliflower head. And he said, you see this? He said, the wind blows away this top leaf on the cauliflower. And when that happens, the sun turns the cauliflower a little yellow. And I said, yeah? And he said, no grocery store in the United States of America will buy this. And at that moment, I realized that it's our expectations and our habits that fueled this problem, and it's our expectations and habits that can change the problem. So Dana, I want to start with you. I want to go back. Take us back 5 years. Was food waste on people's radar? Take us back to the work you were doing at the NRDC then.
Yeah, well, I might go back like
7, okay.
So I came to this problem kind of working on a project with the fruit and vegetable industry, and was sort of put on looking into waste, really, of hard goods like irrigation piping, and I came across a paper by the National Institutes of Health that said 40% of food was going to waste, and yeah, that was probably about 25% of the water in this country.
And you're thinking, if that number's true, there should be outrage.
And I just stopped and I was like, oh my gosh, if that were true, why is nobody talking about this? Or, very few people at the time, save for Jonathan Bloom's amazing book. And it struck me as, gosh, here we are trying so hard to make agriculture sustainable, and to get people to save just a little bit of water, a little bit of energy, and yet all of this food was going to waste. And that, led me to write a report that, happened to get a lot of press, and all of a sudden, I felt like, wow, there's a lot of attention to this issue, but I could tell you every single person working on it, practically. I could have told you everything that was going on, and it was amazing things. It was Rob Kaplan, who was at the time with Walmart, calling, and it was Elise Golan at USDA, and so many other people in this room who were working on that topic, but I could have told you all of them. And what I think is really unbelievable looking out today is just the fact that there are so many new faces, brilliant minds. Listening to the Innovator Workshop yesterday, it's just such an amazing wealth of brain power going into this topic now, and I have no idea who's doing what, and it's unbelievable.
Too much to keep track of.
Unbelievably happy. Yeah.
Jesse Fink, your aha moment, I gather, came about 8 years ago or so. You gathered a bunch of people on your farm in Wilton, Connecticut. Paint the picture for us.
Sure. We have had a farm in Wilton, Connecticut that my wife Betsy started and ran, and that through her farming efforts we realized how much food we weren't wasting, but as she would bring it to the local grocer, as she was bringing fresh produce to the grocer, she'd see what was coming out the back end and what was being wasted. As a result of that, we started funding a few nonprofit groups, and many who are here today. And we started funding so that we could learn, as a philanthropic funder, what was really going on, what was happening in gleaning programs, in food recovery programs, in prevention programs. And we brought as many as we could to our farm under a tent. And we brought all the groups, and we actually brought non-food waste groups that we were funding that were in sustainable agriculture, so that the people who were spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to increase local, healthy, sustainable agriculture could understand that 40% of it was going out on the other side. So the aha moment for us was in that tent when there were probably 60 mostly nonprofit professionals in that tent, all getting up there, talking their story, what they were doing. And at the end of the day, Betsy and I went home and said, are we really doing anything? Everybody is working really hard, but are we making a dent in the systemic issue of food waste? And it was after that tent that actually got us to really think about the concept behind what has become ReFed, which was to really create the data so that anyone who was interested could understand where are the opportunities to play a role in reducing food waste. And our whole concept of a big tent that's really started as a tent at Millstone Farm and then got to be a bigger tent when we launched the roadmap 2 years ago with about 140 people who were there and many of the leaders, thought leaders here who contributed to the roadmap. To me, this is an aha moment. This is a tent, and just looking around the room, it's an amazing group. And to echo Dana, I sat through the whole day yesterday with the innovators, and to me, as an entrepreneur in my whole life, the innovators who are starting new companies, starting new nonprofits, are inside large, really great nonprofits and large food service. There's innovation that's happening all over the place, whether it's entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial. And to me, this really is the aha moment when it goes from a few people doing things to really a large group of just well-intended and really smart people doing things.
I was laughing a moment ago because Dana handed me a hard copy of her book, and I had interviewed her about this book a couple years ago when it came out, and one of the tips she gave me is that you can use sour milk. So last year we got home from a long vacation and we had nothing in the refrigerator. My kids wanted pancakes, so I was making pancake batter, and I took this sour milk and I poured it in there, and my middle son Tommy said, "God, Mom, what are you doing? That milk stinks to high heaven." And I said, "Dana Gunders says it's okay." So I looked it up on page 86 today, and what you actually said, it's that sour milk is not likely to make you sick. I don't think my kids got sick. Anyway, you were right. Sour milk is fine. But my next question is, you focused a lot on raising awareness so that a family of 4 realizes what they might be wasting. Why is it still important to scale that message to the individual, to the family? I mean, we're here now with, Kroger and Walmart thinking about these big systems change, but why is it still so important for each consumer to know the impact of their own purchases?
Because we, as the largest, as consumers, are still the largest contributor to food going to waste in the country. And I think, for those of us who've been working on this issue for some time, it feels like everybody's talking about it right now. We are in some ways kind of talking to ourselves, and I think you stop the average person on the street and they are not thinking about not wasting food today. They're also not waking up meaning to waste food in that day. And I think the nice thing about the home, the challenge is changing people's behavior in the kitchen is a huge challenge. And sometimes when you manage your food in a way that wastes less food, it leads to fresher, healthier food, and it saves you time and all that good stuff. Other times, it's just darn inconvenient. And to me, in the home setting, that's one of our biggest challenges, is that convenience is king these days, and wasting less is just, it's not always convenient. So, but I like to start with the easier, you know, I feel like any dent we can make is good, and so starting with sort of making it feel easy to people and talking about doing things just like freezing food or some of the very easy steps, learning about, you know, how to navigate around date labels, things like that, are good starting places that don't have to feel like an effort.
And what you learn is that there are always new ears for this message. I think we like to imagine that what we know and the people in our circles know that everybody knows. And as a journalist, what you realize is that every time you do a story where you just lay out the basics about food waste, how much is being wasted, where the problem comes from, the distribution of the problem, there are always people who know nothing about this issue. You can have to keep doing it, keep telling the story over and over and over again. Jesse, I want to talk to you a little bit about, you're kind of a systems guy, right? So you've looked at this problem and mapped out systems solutions. I know when the ReFed report came out 2 years ago, I meant to file a story on it that day, and it took me 3 days to comb through all the data. I think, you know, toggle through all the different ways in which you could use the information. It was an amazing amount of data, an amazing report. As you look at the changes happening, do you look out and say, oh, here's one area, here's one part of the system where that's still a dragon yet to slay. This is where we still need to do work. What's the untapped part of this?
Yeah. You know, when we worked on the roadmap, we kind of, and again, thanks to many people in this room who are involved in it, we sort of thought that our work would be done with the roadmap, that we would publish it and off we'd go. And I think what we realized is that the easy part of the solutions either were done or would be done. And it's the systems piece of it, or the multi-stakeholder aspects of it, that's hard to do when there's person or the entity that should be spending the money is not the beneficiary of the result of that. And I mean, as I look around, I'm just looking at Doug, and you know, and the challenges of when you're pioneering a new business model, a new system, how challenging that is. And so I think for many of us in the room, it's really now connecting the dots that the ReFed report was identified solutions. There are other activities that have happened since that identified solutions. Now they actually need to get done. And that's why this room is filled, because things are getting done. What interests me personally is when where it's not getting done, and where there could be creative use of capital. That's, I think, what I represent is the capital and the innovation aspect of that. And there's different forms of capital, and they're here in this room. There's philanthropic capital, which is so important in grants. And there's impact investment capital, which could come from philanthropy, could come from families. And then there, in a much larger amount, is commercial capital. And I think what many of us are trying to do is to figure out how to de-risk some of these activities and prove out models so that we can unleash the large amount of capital and start solving the problem. Because what we all know is that there really is economic benefit in reducing the waste.
Give us an example of a couple of the impact investments you're making in the space.
Yeah, well, we have, again, through our foundation, we have done quite a few philanthropic grants, and excited to see the grantees in this room. On the investment side, where we are expecting a financial return in addition to an impact return, there are two organizations that I believe are here too. One is Divert and one is Spoiler Alert, that we have, as a family foundation, have made those investments. And after yesterday and doing the speed dating of the innovators, there are a few more that actually is very interested in seeing new technology, whether it's information technology or packaging technology or logistics technology, or things that are just not even technology. So spoil, learn, divert are the key ones that we have done, but we are in the process of reviewing others as well.
Got it. So Dana, you've hung your own shingle now. You've left NRDC. You're sort of a consultant out in this space. Are people calling you up, knocking on your door saying, Dana, we need you to develop a food waste reduction program for us? Or, I mean, how's it going?
You know, it's been really interesting. Surprisingly, the first people who were knocking on my door were like large tech companies, like the Googles of the world, who actually...
That has to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what's a good thing is that, you know, it is great and amazing how many, you know, entrepreneurs there are, but on the intrapreneur side, the tech world is seeing this and going, whoa, you know, how can our capabilities in, you know, geomapping or whatever it is, how can they play in this food space, which maybe they haven't thought about that much before. So that's been really exciting. And all the way from that to smaller, like, incubators, we're looking at how do we infuse this into the companies that are coming through our door, and some companies in between. So so far it's been really fun, and it's, for me, a great chance to really get my hands a little more dirty.
Got it. One of the surprises about reporting is you never know how your audience is going to react. You can predict the NPR audience is a know-it-all audience. We have a lot of retired professors who like to write in, right? So if you get anything wrong or maybe wrong or something questionable, you're going to hear about it from a lot of people. So 2 years ago, Tom Vilsack announced the first U.S. food waste reduction goals. And in doing so, he gave me this great analogy. He said, you know, we waste so much food that we could fill the Sears Tower 44 times every year with all the wasted food. And I thought, wow, that'd be a really hard thing to quantify, but I'm going to go with it because it sounded good. And so I put it into the story. And the next morning, I wake up and I have this list of corrections in my inbox that have been forwarded to me. And sure enough, the first one I open, you can see the top. It's such and such retired professor of statistics and mathematics at, you know, Boston University. And I think, oh gosh, here we go. And he writes, fabulous job on the food waste report. That's amazing that you could fill the Sears Tower 44 times. Correction, it's not the Sears Tower, it's the Willis Tower. So, talk about some surprises along the way for you guys. Speed at which this movement has moved, any surprises?
You know, I would say a surprise, Dana and myself, Emily, and there probably are 5 other people that were asked to testify 2 years ago at the House Ag Committee. And the surprise that I had never done that. So we had a meet and greet where we were walked around a couple days before then to meet the different congressmen and their staff before we sat in that hall and testified. And I think the surprise was that everybody has a food waste story. Each of those men and women who are elected officials wanted to tell their story, and they had a story, and it was very personal to them because they represented ag districts. And they understood how much effort was going into growing the food, and yet they had hunger issues in their districts, and they wanted to solve the districts. So it made me, after that exercise, feel like we are all working on a problem that at the highest level should not be politicized, and that there are ways that we can be talking about it to get our country, which is, you know, having challenges and so many other issues, to be focused on reducing food waste and reducing hunger. What happened after that is everyone has their own way of how they actually want to solve it. So it was a challenge to try to not get into the political weeds of the solutions. But at the highest level, this is something that really does appeal to our elected official. I think it's an opportunity to make change.
And it's happening.
And it's happening, yeah.
Dana, surprises? I was surprised to hear, by the way, Joanne Berkenkamp told me that there have been $75 million in donated ad time for the food waste campaign. It's amazing.
Save the Food campaign,
Yeah.
yes, that's been unbelievable. It was 66 last I heard, so that's good. Surprises. I think fundamentally what's been really surprising to me about this issue is that, you know, at its core, it's kind of a depressing the numbers are pretty depressing. It's not a very positive thing, and yet, for whatever reason, people feel very positive about it and get really excited to talk about it. And
Is it because, as so many people have said today, it is a problem we can solve?
I think so. I think it is that it is a problem, that it feels very, you can really wrap your hands around it in your own life, in your own work. The numbers are shocking, so it feels like, oh, and it can actually have a big difference. And I do think it has a lot of fun to it in the form of, fun recipes and leftovers and just kind of cool ways to, I can actually use this byproduct, reuse stories and things like that. And the great stories around, when food rescue does help people as well. So I think that's been really positive. I'll say the other thing is that, I remember, so the report I wrote came out in 2012. In 2013, Phil Lempert, the supermarket guru,
yes.
Right? So it was like a moment for me because he named food waste one of the top trends of 2013. And I was so excited.
But it's not a trend. It's a thing here to stay, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say is, at the time I was really excited that it was named a top trend. And I think what's been surprising, extremely pleasantly surprising for me is that I don't think it's a trend. And I don't even think it's necessarily being treated as a trend in the sense that it's really become a core pillar in a sustainable food program for, looking across whatever a sustainable food program is in a company, in a city, in an institution. It's like one of the 5 core things that you do when you're addressing sustainable food. And so to me, for it to really transition from being a top trend to just a core pillar was surprising and I think just really exciting.
I think the optimist in all of us was listening to the last presentation and saying, wow. I'm wondering, as you were listening to that presentation, if you had your crystal ball, would you say, yeah, by 2050, we can use reduction in food waste to get to drawdown?
Well, I think that's why we're here. I think some of the other pieces of that pie chart will have perhaps more obstacles because there are embedded industries that really don't want things to change. I think in our industry, it's here. I mean, that's probably the most exciting part about it is that the folks, the leaders in the food businesses are here saying we want to be a part of the solution. And so I do think that the food waste pie chart is achievable, and it was nice to see the colors and how you made it all happen.
And crystal ball with you, Dana, you look forward 20 years. What can we expect? What kind of conversations would be happening in this room if there were a food waste summit 2040?
Hopefully there won't be a food waste summit in 20 years. We'll put ourselves out of business. I think I like to think that far out because I think in the short term there's a lot of concern that, what if we waste less food and then farmers don't sell as much or something like that. And I think the reality is that the time frame of the issue is such that what we're really after, and I think we need to sort of keep our eyes on that prize, is to produce the same amount of food in 2050 as we do today, as Chad was saying, and just do that and use it in a much more wise way. So I think the conversations and then are, I don't know, probably around like keeping insects, but your live insects in your house that you then, just
cultivate for
harvest
food
when you're hungry or something.
All right, well, Jesse Fink and Dana Gunders, thanks so much, and thanks to you guys.
And could I just take 1 second to
Yeah.
thank Allison for being a huge component
Yeah.
of keeping this issue at the forefront over the last whatever it is years.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of great story ideas today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie. I'm from the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic. I'm just going to give you all a couple of logistics before we send you off to your next sessions. So we are going to move to a coffee break now. There is coffee, tea, and water in the hallway behind you. There are lots of wonderful recovered and donated snacks in the hallway by registration. So please check those out. All the plates and cutlery we have here are compostable. The cups are recyclable. And you can also check out the exhibit tables out in the hallway while you're out there. There are lots of great organizations distributing materials and ready to tell you about their work. A couple other logistics, restrooms are at the end of both hallways. And then after this snack break, we are going to go to our first breakout sessions. All of the breakout sessions are going to be up here on the second floor. They'll either be here in Milstein or in the 2 second floor classrooms farthest to the left, so right outside these doors. You can find the sessions and the room numbers in your program. There will also be signs outside each session. And one thing to note is that we are running a little bit behind. So if we can try and keep the break to about 10 minutes and trying to get these next breakout sessions started by 10:50 if possible. That would be great, and we're going to try and wrap these up by noon to make sure that everyone has time to get lunch before heading to the next thing. If you're a session leader and if you're in a session that has fewer panelists, just trying to keep it as close to the original time as possible will give people more time to get their lunch. And then after this next breakout session, everyone is going to come back here. There will be lunch set up in this back hallway, and you will grab your lunch and head to the working groups. So you can read more about what the working groups are on pages 7 and 8 of your program book. But basically, these are meant to be opportunities to have discussions among different stakeholder groups and identify opportunities for collaboration and action. You can find information about all of the options. There are 6 of them in your program book. But we hope that you'll pick one that you're interested in and attend both days. They'll meet today and tomorrow. And these working groups will be in the 3 classrooms outside in this hallway, and then the 3 directly below us on the first floor. Again, all the room numbers are in your program books. There will be signs. And then the registration table staff and any of us here wearing the purple name tags can also help direct you, so come find one of us if you have any questions about where to go. Again, please be nice to our staff and volunteers. They're working really hard and they will help you get where you need to go. So I'm going to send you all off, but one last reminder, one last plug to please contribute to the online conversation. We have a hashtag. It's hashtag US Food Waste Summit. So go off, go get coffee, go tweet, and we'll see you at 10:50.